There's something peculiar about walking into a crowded room and feeling completely invisible. Not because you're trying to hide, but because somehow, despite being surrounded by dozens of people, you remain fundamentally unseen. You watch conversations flow around you like water around a stone, natural and effortless for everyone else, yet impossibly complex when you try to join. You've probably told yourself it's just bad luck, wrong timing, or maybe you simply haven't met the right people yet. But deep down, there's a nagging suspicion that something about you repels the very connections you desperately crave. If you find yourself nodding along, if Friday nights feel more like prison sentences than celebrations, if your phone stays silent for days except for delivery notifications and spam calls, then you might recognize yourself in what I'm about to share. Because the truth is, having few or no friends isn't random. It's not about geography, timing, or cosmic misfortune. There are specific traits, specific patterns of thinking and behaving that create an invisible barrier between you and meaningful connection. Some of these traits you developed as protection. Others emerge from years of misunderstanding how social dynamics actually work. And a few might surprise you because they seem positive on the surface, but somehow push people away. What I'm about to reveal isn't designed to make you feel worse about your situation. It's designed to give you clarity. Because once you understand the real reasons behind your isolation, once you can name the invisible forces keeping you alone, you can finally start changing them. Psychology has spent decades studying the mechanics of human connection, and what researchers have discovered might fundamentally shift how you see yourself and your relationships. By the end of this exploration, you'll understand not just why friendship has felt so elusive, but exactly which patterns you need to address to transform your social reality. The first trait that consistently appears in people who struggle to form friendships is something psychologists call emotional hypervigilance. This is the tendency to scan every interaction for signs of rejection, judgment, or disapproval. If you have this trait, you don't just listen to what people say, you analyze their tone, dissect their facial expressions, and search for hidden meanings in casual comments. When someone says they're busy and can't hang out, you don't just accept it at face value. Your mind immediately begins constructing elaborate theories about what they really mean. This hypervigilance developed for a reason. Maybe you learned early that people's moods were unpredictable, that affection could disappear without warning, or that saying the wrong thing had serious consequences. Your brain adapted by becoming extraordinarily sensitive to social cues, turning you into a human radar system constantly scanning for emotional danger. The problem is, this same sensitivity that once protected you now sabotages your ability to connect authentically with others. When you're hypervigilant, conversations become exhausting mental gymnastics. Instead of being present and enjoying someone's company, you're busy monitoring their reactions, adjusting your behavior in real time, and second-guessing every word that comes out of your mouth. People can sense this tension, even if they can't name it. They feel the weight of being analyzed, the pressure of your constant emotional surveillance, and it makes them uncomfortable in ways they might not even consciously understand. The cruel irony is that your heightened awareness of social dynamics doesn't actually make you better at navigating them. It's like trying to drive while staring intensely at the speedometer. Your attention becomes so focused on monitoring and control that you lose the natural flow that makes interactions enjoyable. People gravitate toward those who make them feel relaxed and accepted, not those who make them feel like they're being examined under a microscope. This leads directly to the second trait that isolates people from meaningful friendships: perfectionist social performance. If you struggle with this, you approach every social interaction like an audition for a role you're not sure you're qualified for. You rehearse conversations in your head, craft carefully neutral responses, and present a polished version of yourself that you hope will be acceptable to others. The goal isn't to share who you really are, it's to avoid making mistakes that might lead to rejection. This perfectionist approach to socializing feels safe because it minimizes the risk of saying something wrong or revealing something that others might judge, but it also minimizes the possibility of genuine connection. Friendship isn't built on flawless performance. It's built on shared vulnerability, mutual acceptance of imperfections, and the comfort that comes from being known and accepted as you actually are, not as the idealized version you think others want to see. When you're constantly performing, people can sense the artificiality, even if they can't articulate what feels off. They might describe you as nice but distant, polite but hard to get to know, or pleasant but somehow unreachable. You become like a beautiful painting behind glass, admirable, but untouchable. People need to feel that they matter enough for you to show them something real, something that isn't carefully curated for public consumption. The third trait that creates friendship barriers is what researchers call emotional intensity mismatches. This happens when your natural emotional range operates at a different frequency than most people around you. You might be someone who feels everything deeply, who processes experiences through multiple layers of meaning, who can spend hours analysing the significance of a single conversation. Or you might be someone whose emotional expression feels muted compared to others, who struggles to generate enthusiasm for things that seem to excite everyone else. Neither extreme is inherently problematic, but both can create disconnection when they're significantly mismatched with your social environment. If you're highly sensitive in a culture that values emotional restraint, people might see you as too intense, too much, too overwhelming. If you're naturally reserved in a culture that values emotional expressiveness, people might see you as cold, disinterested, or emotionally unavailable. This mismatch creates a terrible double bind. If you try to adjust your emotional expression to fit in better, it feels fake and exhausting. If you stay true to your natural emotional range, you risk being misunderstood or rejected. Either way, authentic connection becomes nearly impossible, because you're either performing emotions you don't feel or suppressing emotions you do feel. The fourth trait involves something called social script confusion. Most people navigate friendships using unspoken rules they absorbed naturally through years of social interaction. They intuitively understand concepts like reciprocity, appropriate levels of sharing, timing, and social boundaries. But if you missed some of these lessons, either because you were isolated during crucial developmental periods or because your family operated by different social rules, you might find yourself constantly confused by social expectations that seem obvious to everyone else. This confusion manifests in various ways. You might share too much too quickly, overwhelming new acquaintances with personal information they're not ready to receive. Or you might share too little, leaving others feeling like they can't get to know you despite spending significant time together. You might struggle with reciprocity, either giving far more than you receive or taking more than feels fair to others. You might miss subtle cues about when conversations should end, when invitations are genuine versus polite, or when people need space versus connection. The frustrating part about social script confusion is that most people can't explain the rules they follow because they learn them unconsciously. When you violate these unspoken expectations, people don't usually tell you directly what went wrong. They just start pulling back, leaving you to wonder what happened and how to avoid repeating the same mistakes. These four traits, emotional hypervigilance, perfectionist social performance, emotional intensity mismatches, and social script confusion, often work together to create a perfect storm of social isolation. They feed off each other, creating cycles that become increasingly difficult to break. The hypervigilance makes you more likely to perform rather than connect authentically. The performance prevents you from learning accurate social scripts. The script confusion increases your emotional intensity around social situations, which further amplifies your hypervigilance. But understanding these patterns is the first step toward changing them. Breaking free from these cycles requires understanding the fifth trait that consistently appears in people who struggle with friendship, something psychologists call relational pessimism. This isn't ordinary sadness or disappointment about past relationships. It's a deep-seated belief system that shapes how you interpret every social interaction through the lens of inevitable failure. When someone doesn't text back immediately, your mind doesn't consider neutral explanations like they're busy or forgot. Instead, it jumps straight to conclusions about rejection or disinterest. This pessimistic framework becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. You enter conversations already braced for disappointment, which affects your energy, your openness, and your willingness to invest emotionally in new connections. People pick up on this defensive posture, sensing that you're already halfway out the door before the relationship has even begun. Your expectation of rejection creates a subtle distance that actually increases the likelihood of the very outcome you're trying to avoid. The sixth trait involves what researchers term social energy depletion. For most people, socializing can be draining, but it's also energizing in certain ways. Good conversations leave them feeling more alive, more connected to themselves and others. But if you have this trait, social interactions feel like running a marathon while wearing heavy weights. Even pleasant conversations leave you exhausted, needing hours or days to recover before you can face another social situation. This isn't necessarily about introversion versus extroversion. It's about the enormous amount of mental and emotional resources you spend during social interactions. Between monitoring for danger, performing perfection, managing emotional intensity mismatches, and trying to decode social scripts, you're operating multiple complex systems simultaneously. It's like trying to have a casual conversation while simultaneously solving calculus problems, translating foreign languages, and performing a gymnastics routine. The exhaustion becomes a barrier to friendship because building relationships requires consistent engagement over time. When every interaction costs you so much energy, you naturally start avoiding them, even when you desperately want connection. You might cancel plans at the last minute, decline invitations you actually want to accept, or limit your social interactions to brief surface-level encounters that feel manageable but never develop into deeper bonds. The seventh trait that creates friendship obstacles is something called authenticity paralysis. This happens when your desire to be genuine conflicts with your fear of rejection, creating a psychological deadlock where you can't figure out who to be in social situations. You know that people value authenticity, but you're terrified that your authentic self isn't likable enough, interesting enough, or acceptable enough to maintain friendships. This creates a peculiar kind of identity crisis where you become hyper-aware of every aspect of your personality, constantly questioning whether each trait, opinion, or preference is helping or hurting your chances of connection. You might find yourself agreeing with viewpoints you don't actually hold, laughing at jokes you don't find funny, or expressing enthusiasm for activities that bore you, all while feeling increasingly disconnected from your own sense of self. The paradox of authenticity paralysis is that the more you try to be likable, the less authentic you become, and the less authentic you are, the less likely you are to attract people who would actually appreciate who you really are. You end up in relationships built on false foundations, constantly exhausted by maintaining a persona that doesn't reflect your true thoughts, feelings, or interests. The eighth trait involves emotional reciprocity confusion. Healthy friendships operate on a complex system of emotional give and take, but if you struggle with this trait, you might have trouble calibrating appropriate levels of emotional exchange. You might be someone who overshares, dumping intense personal experiences on acquaintances who aren't prepared to handle that level of intimacy. Or you might be someone who undershares, maintaining such careful emotional boundaries that others feel shut out from your inner world. Both patterns prevent the natural progression of friendship, which typically involves gradually increasing levels of mutual vulnerability and support. If you reveal too much too quickly, you can overwhelm people and make them feel like the relationship is moving faster than they're comfortable with. If you reveal too little, people eventually give up trying to connect with you because they feel like they're doing all the emotional work without getting to know who you really are. This confusion about emotional reciprocity often stems from growing up in environments where emotional sharing was either dangerous or completely absent. You might have learned that revealing feelings leads to punishment, manipulation, or abandonment. Or you might have grown up in a family where emotions were never discussed, leaving you without a template for how to navigate emotional intimacy safely. The ninth trait that blocks friendship formation is what psychologists call social comparison addiction. This involves constantly measuring your social skills, personality, achievements, and life circumstances against others, usually concluding that you come up short. When you meet new people, instead of focusing on enjoying their company or exploring potential compatibility, you're busy cataloguing all the ways they seem more confident, more successful, more naturally social, or more inherently likable than you. This comparison mindset poisons potential friendships from the beginning because it prevents you from seeing others as complex, flawed human beings who might genuinely enjoy your company. Instead, you see them as superior beings who are temporarily tolerating your presence until they realize you're not worth their time. This perspective creates a power imbalance in your mind where you're constantly trying to prove your worth rather than simply being yourself and allowing relationships to develop naturally. The irony is that this constant comparison often blinds you to the reality that many people struggle with the same insecurities you do. That confident person you're admiring might be just as anxious about the interaction as you are. That seemingly perfect life you're envying might be carefully curated to hide struggles you can't see. Your assumption that everyone else has social connection figured out prevents you from recognizing potential friends who might be feeling just as isolated and uncertain as you are. The 10th trait that consistently appears in people who struggle with friendship is something called emotional regulation overwhelm. This happens when your internal emotional weather is so intense and unpredictable that managing it consumes most of your psychological resources. leaving little energy for the complex emotional work that friendships require. You might experience emotions more intensely than others, have difficulty calming yourself when upset, or struggle with emotional states that seem to last longer than what feels normal. When you're constantly managing internal emotional chaos, it becomes nearly impossible to be emotionally available for others. Friends need to feel that you have some capacity to support them, to celebrate their successes, to offer comfort during their struggles. But if you're always in crisis mode, always overwhelmed by your own emotional experiences, you inadvertently signal that you don't have space in your life for anyone else's emotional needs. This doesn't mean you need to have perfect emotional control to maintain friendships. It means you need enough emotional stability to occasionally step outside your own experience and genuinely care about what's happening in someone else's life. People can sense when you're so absorbed in your own emotional world that you can't truly see them, and this creates a fundamental barrier to mutual connection. These traits don't exist in isolation, and recognizing them isn't about self-condemnation. They developed as adaptations to challenging circumstances, as survival strategies that once served important protective functions. Understanding these patterns is only the beginning, because awareness alone doesn't automatically dissolve the invisible walls you've built around yourself. The real challenge lies in recognizing how these traits manifest in your daily interactions, how they whisper their familiar refrains in moments when connection feels within reach, then somehow slips away like water through cupped hands. You might find yourself at a coffee shop, overhearing a conversation between strangers that sounds effortless, natural, punctuated by genuine laughter and comfortable silences. You wonder what it must feel like to exist without constantly calculating the perfect response, without rehearsing spontaneity until it becomes mechanical. These people seem to inhabit their own skins so comfortably, moving through social spaces like fish through water, while you feel like you're wearing an invisible costume that never quite fits. The 11th trait that creates friendship barriers involves something researchers call social timing dysregulation. This isn't about being chronically late or early, though that might be a symptom. It's about a fundamental disconnect from the natural rhythms of social interaction. You might text too quickly after meeting someone, appearing desperate or overwhelming. Or you might wait too long, missing the window when interest naturally fades into indifference. You might stay too long at gatherings, unable to read the subtle cues that signal when conversations are winding down, or leave too early just when connections were beginning to deepen. This timing confusion extends to emotional rhythms as well. You might offer support when someone needs space, or give space when they're craving connection. You might share excitement about achievements when others are processing disappointment, or express concern when they're celebrating success. It's like trying to dance to music only you can hear, constantly out of step with the emotional tempo of those around you. The frustrating aspect of social timing dysregulation is that these rhythms feel intuitive to most people. They don't consciously think about when to reach out, how long to wait, or when to shift conversation topics. But for you, every social interaction becomes a complex calculation without a clear formula. You're left guessing at rules that seem to change depending on the person, the context, and factors you can't identify. The 12th trait involves what psychologists term relational identity confusion. This happens when you've spent so long adapting to different social situations that you've lost touch with who you actually are in relationships. You might have one personality with colleagues, another with family, another with acquaintances, each carefully calibrated to what you think that particular group expects or values. But beneath all these adaptive personas, you're not sure which version represents your authentic self. This confusion creates a profound loneliness, because even when you're surrounded by people who seem to like you, you suspect they only like the version of yourself you've presented to them. You worry that if they saw the parts of you that don't fit their expectations, if they witnessed your contradictions, your uncertainties, your less polished moments, their acceptance would evaporate. So you maintain the performance, but the performance becomes a prison that separates you from genuine intimacy. The 13th trait that blocks meaningful connection is something called vulnerability resistance. This goes deeper than simple privacy or emotional guardedness. It's an active, often unconscious, effort to prevent others from seeing you in moments of genuine need, struggle, or uncertainty. You might be excellent at supporting others through their difficulties, always ready with advice, comfort, or practical help. But when you're facing challenges, you disappear, handle everything alone, or present only sanitized versions of your struggles that don't require real support from others. This resistance to vulnerability creates relationships that feel fundamentally unbalanced. Others share their fears, their failures, their moments of confusion or pain, and you respond with compassion and understanding. But you never reciprocate by allowing them to support you through similar experiences. Without realizing it, you're signaling that you don't trust them with your full humanity, that you see them as too fragile or untrustworthy to handle your real problems. Friendship requires mutual vulnerability, the gradual exchange of increasingly personal truths that create bonds of intimacy and trust. When you consistently refuse to be vulnerable, you prevent relationships from deepening beyond pleasant but superficial interactions. People begin to sense that they don't really know you, that despite spending significant time together, you remain fundamentally mysterious and distant. The 14th trait involves social context blindness, an inability to accurately read the unspoken rules that govern different social environments. Every social situation has its own culture, its own expectations about appropriate topics, energy levels, and behaviour. A conversation at a funeral operates by different rules than a conversation at a birthday party. Workplace friendships follow different protocols than childhood friendships or romantic relationships. These patterns aren't permanent fixtures of your personality. They're learned responses that can be unlearned, protective mechanisms that can be gently dismantled once they're no longer needed. The same awareness that allowed you to recognize yourself in these descriptions can become the foundation for profound change. Because understanding why connection has felt impossible is the first step toward making it inevitable.